So thank you, everyone, attending our digital equity stakeholder meeting for the city of Watertown. We have a few people in the room here. We have, looks like about 13 people remote on Zoom, and CTC will be leading the presentation today. Thank you for all of the Watertown city departments and community agencies who participated in this. We have launched the public survey, and it looks like Watertown is in the lead for responses so far, so that's good. We have over 50 responses, I guess, for the public survey. We're going to be pushing that pretty heavily in the next coming weeks. A reminder that all of the resources for this project are at watertown-ma.gov/digital equity. That's all one word. There'll be a link to the survey there, any other resources or information, and we actually have all of the printable translated surveys are available there. So if you would like to distribute those within your own agency, you can feel free to print those. CTC will reimburse for printing costs as we distribute the surveys. We are also going to designate the library, thanks to Caitlin, as the official pickup drop-off location for any paper surveys that people want. So probably tomorrow we will send out another email blast and social media blast, etc. And at some point a flash vote reminder, in addition to more coverage on cable access, encouraging people to take the survey online at our digital equity link or to pick up a survey at the library and return it. We are looking for responses by July 15th, I think. So we have about 3 weeks window that we're looking at. And with that being said, I'll turn it over now to CTC for a presentation, just sort of on the broader concepts of digital equity. I know this is kind of an exciting time. The Biden administration is pushing some funding for broadband access. The state of Massachusetts and MBI are going to be making funds and resources available, both money and potentially some staffing and other resources to start looking at gaps in broadband access, device access, literacy, et cetera. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to CTC for their presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Franny Cooper, Director of Regional and Local Consulting for CTC Technology, and with me is Era Casey, who is a broadband analyst in our group. And so, as Chris mentioned before, we have with the city of Watertown, and we have gone through the Massachusetts Broadband Institute, also known as MBI, to do this digital equity planning on a municipal level. We have right now 5 municipalities, including the city of Watertown. As part of this project, this meeting today was overarching view of what broadband is and what digital equity is all about. So I hope this can be interactive. I don't like to have, this is a heavy talking session from me, but I hope you'll interrupt me at any time. Since the chat is disabled, you can just raise your hands and I'll if you have any comments or questions. And we can get as detailed as you want in some of these concepts, but this is just designed to be an overview of what broadband is all about, and why should we care about this? Why are we spending all this money on doing this at this point in time? So
great. And I just promoted you to co-host, Franny. Just
okay. Okay. Actually, if you could promote Era, who's running the deck, or do you already have co-hosts on?
I'll do that.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So this is just kind of the topics we're going to cover today. Why is broadband relevant? Some elements of the technology, information about speeds and what about infrastructure, and then go over the digital equity. So in terms of broadband overall, you can go to the next slide. It's so enmeshed in everything we do. So in terms of all these different industries, I mean, access to health records, in terms of public safety, being connected so that records can be downloaded or uploaded, and first responders can get to where they need to go. In terms of energy, smart grids, in government, there's so many applications and services that are available online and only online. And in education, as we all know, during the pandemic, it became really clear that we had to be connected because kids and university students could not go to school, and learning had to happen virtually. So it's really important in all aspects of our society today. And broadband is defined as, it's not just internet connectivity, it's high-speed internet connectivity. So in terms of workforce development, it's important for job training, a lot of online job training modules right now. In terms of economic development, businesses, if you don't have great connectivity, businesses don't want to come to your city or state. So it's very essential for doing business on a daily basis, and in terms of expanding into different areas if a business is growing. Broadband is really critical for transportation in terms of congestion and safety regulations. And then in terms of digital literacy, so many of our daily functions are online now versus where they were paper records before. And so someone who does not have that ability, if there's seniors who don't want to get online, won't have access to certain services that are available. So next. Stop me at any time. So let's next go to the technology. So what is not known and widely among many groups is that it's not just one network. There are multiple different phases to this. So the long haul fiber is, we can liken it to the highway, and the middle mile fiber is the side road, and then the last mile is what gets to the end user, whether it's a business or the home. So there are multiple different components to it, and just because you have middle mile fiber doesn't necessarily mean you have access to the home. You just have the capacity to draw that fiber into different communities. And there are different technologies that we're going to go over where you can do it with fiber to the actual premises or through a fixed wireless service. So like I said, the long haul fiber is what we need overall as infrastructure. And then the middle mile fiber is the bridge between the end user and the long haul fiber. So this is just what it looks like. Each strand of fiber can hold many hundred terabits, and there are different fiber counts for the long haul, middle mile, and last mile. And the thing with fiber is it's also very durable. And if we could go with fixed wireless solutions, but they're not favored in terms of funding or in terms of because there's a lot more maintenance involved, and they don't last as long. So variable cost versus fixed cost, fiber is much more expensive than fixed wireless. Next. So this is just an overview of the different technologies that have developed over time. And it's kind of interesting to see this timeline that dial-up started in the mid-90s. And that was a huge revolution, but that was over copper, the existing copper infrastructure. So it was limited in what it could do. And then with DSL, it was faster, but it was still over the copper wire. So there were bandwidth restrictions for that. Cable companies revamped their systems to include data, not just entertainment. And so the last mile cable is available, and the infrastructure can support high speeds through last mile technology. However, it's really restricted in terms of upload speeds. So, for example, I have Comcast Infinity service, and I can get up to 1 gigabit, but I can only get up to about 35 megabits upload speed, because the cable technology is limited that way. And then fiber, as I mentioned before, is kind of the gold standard. Fiber to the premises, really high speeds, really high capacity, and longevity of the infrastructure as well. Next. Does anyone have any questions so far? Nope.
No, I've got some comments we'll save for the end, just to kind of relate how this fits into planning specifically for Watertown.
Well, do you want to jump in now?
Briefly, I think at the end will be more appropriate.
Okay.
But,
okay.
Yeah, I think we'll tie this back to Watertown at the end in terms of projects the city already has in the works, and then what we're thinking in terms of delivering fiber, potentially to the home, or other places where there are gaps, and how that fits into our overall equity planning.
Perfect. Okay. So as I mentioned before, broadband is high-speed internet access. I'll get into the definition of what high speed is according to different entities. So fiber, these are different types of infrastructure. Fiber, coax is for the cable infrastructure. DSL, as I mentioned, is over copper telephone lines that were repurposed, and it cannot have the speeds or the bandwidth that's needed for, I mean, it's limited today, and for future needs, it's going to be really pretty antiquated. So fixed wireless can get up to really high speeds. There can be inherent problems. The biggest problem with fixed wireless is obstacles. So you need line of sight to the actual point of presence for fixed wireless, and it's based on a fiber backbone. And then there's mobile wireless, which is a completely different thing than broadband. So for download speeds, I mentioned before, so download is if you're streaming a movie, it's the speed at which you're receiving the information. Upload is the speed at which you're transmitting information. Latency is latency is often an issue with satellite communications, and that wasn't mentioned in the previous one, even though satellite is an up and coming technology for internet access. Usually the issue is latency, so there's a lag between the time the information is sent and it's received by the end user. And then jitter, just time variations of the information, so it's inconsistent. So there are two concepts that are important: bits per second, so that's the speed. So when we say 100 gigabits per second, that it's a lot of information going over in over fiber. So megabits are a million bits, and we used to talk in kilobits when these technologies were first coming out. So we've really gone exponentially to a high level of data in a very short time. So bytes is the quantity or the capacity. So there can be data limits on usage, so that the bytes or megabytes or gigabytes would refer to the data caps. So this is just basically showing that the FCC has defined, and we'll get into this a little bit further, as the minimum amount of bandwidth that we need is 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. But our usage is actually far exceeding that for the different applications that we're using, whether it's for remote working, whether it's for gaming or streaming. And we anticipate with the evolution of technology and other applications coming that the bandwidth needs will be much higher in the future. So the download and upload speed of 25.3 is really kind of the baseline and not where we need to be going forward. I'm not going to get into all of the details here. This is just comparing different types of applications, whether it's gaming or video conferencing or home security, and the variation of the bandwidth that's used. And as you can see, this is the anticipated bandwidth that we're going to need in the future for similar applications and future needs. So we're not anywhere near where we need to be in terms of our infrastructure right now. As I mentioned before, the FCC says the minimum is 25.3. So any areas that do not have infrastructure that delivers bandwidth of 25 download, 3 upload is considered unserved and eligible for funding. That's the key. It's going to be prioritized for funding. But now the standard for anything that is going to get built has to be a minimum of 100 down and 20 up. And so for the federal funding that is being distributed in the next period of time, it will have to be, the infrastructure will have to be built at a minimum of 120. And for the funding, anything between 25.3 and 100 down, 20 up is considered underserved. So that's the second tier of how the funding is going to be distributed. So unserved first and underserved second. This is just comparing different types of wireless and wireline technologies and their speeds and their bandwidth. I'm not going to go into detail unless someone wants to dig into this further. All right, and we talked about the long haul, middle mile, and last mile. The last mile infrastructure, if it's fiber to the premises, it's, like I said, the preferable technology because it's really easy to upgrade. There's low maintenance. It is a high cost technology to install in the beginning, but less costly to maintain over time. And it can also be invasive in terms of trenching and so on, if it's underground fiber. Next. So coaxial or cable internet is also a legacy technology. It is not as sophisticated or high bandwidth as fiber. So DOCSIS is the standard for mobile, and that stands for Data over Cable Services Interface Specification. So like I said, the download speeds can get up to a gigabit. Some aging infrastructure can't get up that high, but with upgrades, it depends on whether the cable company wants to upgrade a certain area. Sometimes if there's not a lot of competition from other providers, they're reluctant to do that. And it is harder to upgrade than fiber. So we talked a little bit about fixed wireless. So this uses antenna I mean, it's based, you have to pull it originally from fiber, but then you can have towers that transmit the signal to the end user locations. In areas where the density, population density is really low, fixed wireless is desirable, because fiber can be cost prohibitive if you have to dig and install fiber for one or two locations way out in a rural area. Also in a rural area, the downside with the fixed wireless is there might be hills and valleys, lots of trees, which are obstacles for the fixed wireless signal. And like I said, you need line of sight from that tower, that transmitter, to the end user in the home or business. And I also mentioned the maintenance costs are higher for fixed wireless. So this is a little bit about satellite. Satellite traditionally has been really expensive and deployed in very remote areas, and is really unreliable. So so end users can spend over $200 a month easily on service, and their connection can drop. There is a new type of satellite. So Starlink is deploying this LEO, low Earth orbiting technology. And that has, I mean, the jury's still out. It's still relatively new. They just started beta testing in many markets, but that may provide a better option than the traditional satellite options that we've had for the last several years. And again, latency is an issue here. So because there just might be a little lag between the time that the data is sent versus when it's received by the end user. All right, let's get to digital equity, which is what our project is all about. And some of you may have been in other stakeholder meetings where we've gone over some of these concepts, but basically the way to look at digital equity is split into 4 different buckets. So we talked a lot about the technology. If you don't have technology at your home, you don't have access. So that's one of the key components. Also, being able to afford a device with adequate capabilities, having tech support, making sure it works well, making sure you can replace it if something goes wrong. That's also an issue for end users. Affordability that covers both service and devices. So, and we're going to talk about ACP in a little bit, which is Affordable Connectivity Program, and subsidies for internet service. And then lastly, the digital literacy and skills. Some people may have the desire to participate in online activities, but just don't know. I mean, we've heard from some of you already that, you know, you have constituents who just are worried about their security and safety. They don't even really know how to turn on a device or use an application, and they need a lot of support in learning how to use those different different portals or software or just the device itself.
And I think I'll share a thought on that, Franny,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's an obligation as we empower more and more people, with access and the device, to have a focus on security and cybersecurity as part of the education and the literacy.
Absolutely.
As we steward people, because it's sort of a double-edged sword where you're taking, populations in a lot of cases who are vulnerable, who might not have a lot of exposure, right, to the internet, and all the great things on the internet, but at the same time, all the risks and dangers. And I think that's a key piece that I haven't seen really focused on a lot, in some of these discussions, not CTC specifically, but just in general. I think as sort of digital shepherds for people coming into this, that's a critical piece to make sure we're not creating new cybersecurity victims by getting people connected.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, the thing is, the scams are getting more and more sophisticated by the day. And in terms of just, they're all, we can fall into a lot of different traps. So yeah, cybersecurity is a huge concern. And particularly for those who aren't participating already, who may not have a device, who aren't online. I know that people have reservations thinking that, oh, you can steal all my bank account information if I log on to my bank, So I agree with you 100%. Next slide. So as part of this project that we're doing, some of you may have seen the slide already. We are looking at what's already happening on the ground in the city of Watertown for each of the municipalities that we're working with on this digital equity planning. Looking at the organizations that are already doing work to reach out to different constituents for this purpose. And looking at the programs that are working, who they're serving, are there certain vulnerable populations or non-English language speaking constituents who are served? Are they constrained by staffing or by budget? Looking at how we can leverage the things that are working and scale them based on the digital equity funding that is going to be available to us in the next period of time. Also asking stakeholders what they're planning, what they may be resource constrained, but want to expand in some way, expand their programs, expand their reach, and what the obstacles are to those things. So that's the first part of this project, is just doing an assessment of what is out there, what is existing, what's working, what's not. Then I want to talk a little bit about the federal funding that's available. Now, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, this is a $42.5 billion program. This one focuses primarily on infrastructure. So getting infrastructure to all locations that are unserved first, like I said, so don't have 25.3, second to the underserved locations, which is between 25.3 and 100 down, 20 up, and the community anchor institutions. So fiber is prioritized in terms of deployment. So for the funding, they will entertain fixed wireless projects as well, but fiber is preferred because of its longevity and flexibility and upgrade capabilities. So originally they said at least, and I think on the next slide, where they just released the allocations by state yesterday, as a matter of fact, President Biden gave an address regarding the allocations by state of this $42.5 billion program. Massachusetts has received $147.4 million. And they had multiple ways and formulas of figuring out how the allocations were going to be done based on the unserved and underserved locations. So it's a mad scramble for all of the states to submit a 5-year action plan. And right now, and CTC has been working on that for other states. We're not working on it at the state level for Massachusetts, but there's several other states in which we are participating in this effort. So that is a big milestone. And there's also a digital equity component where there's a $60 million program as for digital equity only per state. So, and this was signed in November 2021, and it's been a process to figure out how to administer all this. As you can imagine, it's a huge effort on a national basis, and then filtering down to the states and then to the local communities. But that's why it's so important for us to connect with the local communities to really understand where the needs are and what is already happening. So I think I've covered most of this. Like I said, Massachusetts got allocated $147.4 million through the BEAD program. And then separate from that is the digital equity planning. This is focused on infrastructure, the BEAD part, and then the digital equity planning on a state level is separate. So the infrastructure will likely get deployed in 2025 or later, and it will take a while. So for the BEAD and digital equity planning through the program I was just talking about, these are what they define as the covered populations. So these populations get priority. Now we're trying to align with that on the local level, but on the state level for digital equity planning, rural residents, low income residents, veterans, seniors, individuals with disabilities, English language learners, ethnic minorities, and incarcerated individuals are considered the populations that should be prioritized. And so if there should be excess funds through BEAD, and the word on the street is there won't be excess BEAD funds, they will be they will be used up. But if there are additional funds, they will be allocated in other areas for specific to this discussion, the digital navigators who help literacy skills on a one-on-one level. We've heard that there is a big need in many areas, but if there's any excess BEAD funding, it'll go to these different groups. I think I mentioned this already, that the states are going to receive $60 million each for digital equity planning, and we are coordinating with MBI, Massachusetts Broadband Institute, to make sure that our efforts and theirs are compatible and sync up with the goals and outcomes. So there will be competitive grants for digital equity after this planning is done, which will take several months. And then the Affordable Connectivity Program, I mentioned this before. This is to provide access to low-income households. They must be below 200% poverty level, and it provides a subsidy. They need to sign up online. So people who are not do not have digital skills need assistance in this area. They need to sign up for this program, but immediately $30 a month is taken off their bill by the internet service provider. So if for some providers, they have programs such as Comcast, they have their Internet Essentials program. So for ACP enrollees, they basically pay nothing. Now, the ACP program is slated to run out probably in 2024. We don't know if there's going to be additional funding poured into this. We hope so, but that's an unknown at this point. But it is definitely undersubscribed in terms of the eligible households. And we want to make sure that we push that to the populations who really need it. If they qualify for SNAP or Lifeline, they will be qualified for this discount. And oh, and I forgot to mention up to $100 for a device as well. And this is just a high-level timeline. This is my last slide on how some of these federal and state programs are going to play out. So we are in a mad scramble to get these 5-year action plans done right now at the state level. And it's good that we're doing this digital equity planning at a local level in tandem with some of these bigger programs. So I think that wraps it up. I will turn it over to you, Chris, in terms of what you want to cover and see if there are any other comments or.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Can you email me that PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
So I can put that on our resource page as well. So thank you for everyone attending in person here and on Zoom. We'll have an opportunity for questions and discussion here in a minute. So this is a big priority for me. I was just saying before we started, I was working on digital equity in Lowell in like 1998, and it's still going. So I don't know how much progress we've made, but we're still fighting a good fight. Obviously, NIT infrastructure is a huge focus for me. Watertown internally has been really aggressive installing municipal fiber, connecting our municipal buildings. We have some aggressive plans happening now. And we've been looking, and I think we wanted to do this the right way, about concepts for public broadband or public Wi-Fi or things like that. We wanted to make sure we were doing it in a targeted way. And not guessing. At the same time, Watertown is also participating with a handful of other communities as part of a broadband coalition, looking at things like public-private partnerships or fiber to the home or things like that, because I think fiber really is the future. 5G serves its role, or that last mile, like Fernie was talking about, connectivity. But we really need those super highways. And fiber really gives you the flexibility and the bandwidth, for the future. There's never going to be anything faster than the speed of light, as far as I know, and just the sheer amount of bandwidth and the future proofing. But also, the challenge is looking at, the scale between 56K and a gig is astronomical, but it's not going to slow down. And I think the biggest change that we're seeing is not just the sheer bandwidth that any one person needs, but if you look at a typical household with the Internet of Things, every device in that household is connected to the internet. You might have multiple laptops, multiple computers, smartphones, right? One or more people trying to work, one or more people trying to go to school, one or more people trying to do telehealth, all at the same time. Or if you're supplying, bandwidth to, say, a housing community or something like that, you don't just think, all that bandwidth is shared. So we want to get as much fiber and as much bandwidth to as many locations as we can. So that's the underlying goal that I'm working on in the background. In the meantime, that's where the other agencies come in, and I'm happy to see that through this whole process, we've had the Housing Authority and library and schools and other community organizations involved to understand those populations better in terms of where the gaps are in terms of literacy, access to devices. Watertown's actually partnered with another group called the Tech Collaborative, who upcycles devices. So they're working on taking basically computer donations and then refurbishing those and making those available to people who need devices to help with that end. We've been working with our cable franchise providers, with Comcast and with Astound, formerly RCN, to look at what discounts are available for people on that. We've been working with literacy programs at the library and the schools and other pieces, along with Tech Goes Home. So we really want to do a comprehensive plan with all these stakeholders. We're having a meeting at 6 o'clock tonight for the public. So hopefully everyone on this can attend, and that will also be broadcast on cable access. And I think the plan is to aggressively seek all of these federal, state funds to continue to be a good partner with MBI. And then to see what we can do within our own capital budgets within Watertown to augment these initiatives. And I think we have good support from our elected officials in that. So welcome any other discussion, comments, questions?
Have we done any mapping to see if there's any of those categories in Watertown? Because I think cable probably on every street and to every house.
Yeah, MBI has done, there is some mapping, and then this will fill in some of that. But yeah, they're doing that at the state and federal level.
So that I assume we won't qualify because we'll have enough. We can provide enough speed.
Yeah, Watertown's in a unique position.
But we don't have fiber.
Yeah, because being, we're basically Boston, so we have access. So we're not underserved or non-served, we have the access. But I will say in Watertown, there is a lack of fiber. So our options for residential consumers are really limited to coax right now with our two franchise agreements. So that's something we need to look at for the future. And then we have unique challenges. Obviously we have income-based, vulnerable, populations. Housing insecure, we have veterans, seniors. We have unique non-English challenges in Watertown and some unique literacy, challenge around, just computer literacy. And then again, the one piece that I'd like to see, played up more is the cybersecurity as a tenet to this, that really needs to be locked in because, just my personal observation looking at the rise and sort of cyber issues over the last few years, it's because a lot of newbies have gotten connected in the last 10 years, right? So a lot of the lessons that more tech seasoned people learned in the last 20 or 30 years, a lot of people are learning for the first time, or sort of pushing this big group of people who've never been connected into sort of dangerous waters. So as great as all this is, I really think that needs to be stressed more. So I'm going to be advocating for the cybersecurity piece, or again, if we're giving people access to broadband or devices, that those come with some intrinsic security features, so we're not just throwing people to the wolves that way. But yes, mapping is crucial.
Yeah. Obviously, there's all the city or the states shared the EJ, which we so half of Watertown has certain categories of populations that are defined as environmental justice. Which I think was part of this application, but that's only a piece of the puzzle and a piece of the story. So I was curious about that. And then there's private fiber in Watertown. Mm-hmm. Apparently. So
well, there's some
on Arsenal Street.
Yeah,
we might have plenty of locations for fiber.
We are starting to see more sort of boutique fiber, where you've got more companies coming in and running their own sort of fiber backbones and getting things connected. And then obviously there's dark fiber. So like our fiber is dark fiber, where it connects, it's sort of self-contained fiber. But in a lot of ways, it's funny that, there was this promise of ubiquitous fiber 20 years ago, and it just never happened. And then you saw things like FiOS, kind of surge and then disappear. It's sort of like, so it's been sort of like strange that it hasn't happened yet.
It's in Belmar.
Yeah. But, and then again, one of the big pieces that we're looking at is this idea of, a fiber marketplace where the city might deliver fiber to the home, like you deliver a road. Yeah. And then you have like basically a virtual marketplace, right? Because fiber, and I won't even attempt to explain this because I've tried explaining it to my wife, and or anybody, and I get this like stare. But if you think about it, like the old cable, right? You have channels, you'd like turn the TV, so you get one wire and you could have like 200 channels on that. Well, fiber can work the same way. So that one piece of fiber can have like different services on it. So you could have healthcare, you could have like municipal utility, you could have an internet connection, you could have phone, right? All this sort of thing, all in that same pipe. So much like, UPS doesn't have their own roads, right? To get where they go, they use the common roads and then they, pull in your driveway. You don't necessarily have to have a road for every internet enabled thing. We can sort of share as we get into creating this marketplace of fiber. So that's all in the back of my mind as we do this. But I think if we put together a comprehensive plan, this is a good partnership with CTC, and I think we are doing this. The timing is great with MBI, with the state efforts, with the federal efforts, that we will optimize Watertown's eligibility for these grants.
Right.
Well, and just to build on that for a second, Chris, I mean, and then, the vision, I think what would really be ideal, which is very hard to execute, is to have your broadband access like your utility, like your electricity or your water. We're not anywhere close to that yet, just because of the way the marketplace is and so many players and so many technologies, and it can't be standardized across the board. I mean, some cities are attempting to do that and give residents and businesses, it's like they are building fiber to every location. And then you can choose from one of 7 ISPs, and you just go on a portal. And if you don't like that service, you can change it. That's great also because it increases the competition. And so it's a more efficient marketplace that way. But it's going to be really hard to get that across the board, and some communities are doing it.
And then it has to be maintained. So we do have a question, comment in the room.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore your part about cybersecurity. I mean, I look at this whole thing through the lens of roots and branches. That digital equity carries with it many, many, many possibilities, as well as perils, and there are also multiple impacts. So I've mentioned before, the link to cable access TV, and all of that. We really need to think of the collateral impacts. But the preamble to the revised city charter does carry provision, and I know the city manager has used the preamble as one of the frames for the entire city budget, citing the safety and tranquility principle. And that notion of safety and tranquility can be embedded in whatever, sort of how this agreement sort of expands, how this project expands. Equity and diversity is one of the principles. Health and well-being, creativity and innovation, accountability and transparency, education and excellence. So virtually all of what the preamble represents in terms of voter-approved values and principles can be the scaffolding, can serve as the scaffolding for this, just as it has, along with some other things, including the comprehensive plan for the city manager's budget. So you're not alone, the voters are with you.
And to underscore that, I mean, I really see, to simplify, our goal is to create a safe, fast, reliable, sort of ubiquitous environment that facilitates all these other things. And for me, that's fiber and maintaining that. And then really it creates that environment for all these other agencies to come in and serve their constituents better. And then also to underscore, I mean, Cable Access has been a phenomenal partner. They're assisting with us, and I see that partnership continuing, as I think they serve a invaluable need within the community that may change but won't go away. And so I see them as a crucial piece as we go through this whole process. And to stress, and again, feel free to jump in, anyone. Please push the survey. Share it with all of your constituents and your groups, and share on your social media. Again, if you go to watertown-ma.gov/digital equity, all the resources are there, linked to the survey. The survey is online in multiple languages. And we have provided the downloadable PDFs in multiple languages, and I see Greg has asked a question there. So go ahead, Greg, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this group. There's been discussion in other communities about micro trenching to provide fiber around town for this type of project. And I just want to reiterate, I think I had this conversation with you, Chris, that I'm not in favor of micro trenching in the streets. It's a way for the utility companies to get out of paying for lease space on utility poles. So it has a lot of damaging impacts to the roadway infrastructure and any utilities that are, not at the proper depth that they should be. So I just want to make sure that that's reiterated early and often, that if we do end up implementing something, we kind of stay away from that.
Yeah, no, I remember our conversation, Greg. But yeah, and basically, I think what Greg's talking about is just sort of not proper conduit, right? So instead of putting a proper conduit in some cases you might have direct bury or shallow conduits or other things, and that causes all sorts of other issues. So I'm with you in being dead set against that.
We'll just build it into the new sidewalks.
Well, I mean, we were talking about streetlights the other day, and I know it may not be the fastest available network out there, but if we put in streetlights with these 7-pin connectors to power something, I mean, that becomes a medium to use that isn't a wire in the ground.
Yeah, and I'd love to pursue that more with you, Greg. We talked about that a little bit because if we basically they're little hubs that sit on the light controls, and as long as you can backhaul them every half a mile or so, then you can create a little mesh network. So you still have that fiber infrastructure. And then you're creating that. And then you get all the advantages of having a hub on the light controls or cameras or air control or whatever you want to do. But
So I'll see you in an hour.
okay, thanks to get in. Thanks, Greg.
Sorry.
Any other, I see Jean's got her hand raised.
Yes, tomorrow I'm going to post, once the papers, all the surveys are at the library. We've got a whole write-up with links and info and asking people to share with people who are not online, blah, blah, blah. So if any of you run your social media accounts for your group or agency, could you share what I have, or feel free to copy it if you want, but I've got a graphic and everything's ready to go. Just waiting for that final paper step.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, our goal is 400 or more responses. We're already over 50 with very little publication. So I'm confident we'll be able to make our goal and then some by the 15th of July.
I had suggested.
14. It's
What's
July
that?
14th.
Oh,
July 14th.
Thank you, Jean.
Yes, I'm staring at the graphic. I was like, wait a minute.
I had suggested to both of you, I don't know if you saw it, that you might consider distributing hard copies at the Watertown Farmers Market. When I was involved, when Watertown Forward was more active, we found that a very effective place. And all you need to do is ask Stephanie and see if there's room. I know they have a table.
That's a good idea. And then have them drop them at the library. I guess,
Yeah, you can then sort of have the drop box there. The farmers market is well attended and it's just started. I know they've already got people booked, but that's a really cool place to go, as is the senior center. And I can't believe I'm one of the senior center. I love my parking pass, my free parking pass. And the housing authority, just to get people, to fill out the paper and then maybe have a drop box there. And the library too.
Yeah, definitely doing the library. I know Lydia was on the call. And she's still here. And I think the housing authority was on, but I'm not sure if they are. But we did mention at the beginning of the meeting, we are going to be dropping off printed surveys tomorrow, and all of the printable ones are on the website. So feel free to print for your location, and then again, if you incur printing costs, you can submit for those. And then I will talk to Stephanie about the farmers market tomorrow. Make a note to myself. Great. Any other comments, discussion? All right, you guys are too easy. So promote the survey. share it. And if you're going to attend the public session at 6 today, that'd be great too. We're really hoping to get some good community engagement in this and do it the right way and make an impact. So I appreciate everyone's efforts and participation, and we'll be in touch.
And I'll send you the slides in just a minute, Chris.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Chris,